All right, so we are back now, reset up the MacBook, and we're about to do the final step of this procedure, which is gonna be in Lightroom. So one thing I didn't show in the last little segment was that on the iPad, essentially what you do when you go into Photos, you just go into the share setting, and then I'm just gonna airdrop that same image that we exported previously in Affinity Photo, which gets saved to your Photos application on iPad. We're just gonna airdrop that back over to the MacBook. So I'm just gonna hit devices here, and then it's going to airdrop over to our computer. And essentially what that does is it just puts the image in your downloads folder right here. So we'll move our iPad out of frame, and we have the image right here. So what I'm gonna do essentially right now is I'm gonna import this photo into Lightroom. I have a specific desktop on my folder, on my desktop that has all the images that I basically need to work on. So it's called Refine, if you're curious or whatever. But I'm gonna just put the photo into here. So I'm gonna come over into Lightroom, and now we're gonna import the photo in. Like I said before, I already have one of these. I have a collection already with these images. So yeah, there's not gonna really be anything life-changing there. I'm just gonna refresh the section. So navigator, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Go to folder library. Okay, we're gonna hit refine, and we're gonna do synchronize folder, synchronize. And now here is our image. Here we are. So we are in Lightroom. I am using Lightroom Classic CC. Here's some of the about information if you want. I'm using version 7. I don't know if that's applicable to you guys. It's just Lightroom. Lightroom hasn't changed that much. So essentially what we're gonna be doing in Adobe Lightroom right now is that we're gonna be doing the final color correction and color grading. So I'm gonna be fixing all of the unevenness in exposure. I'm gonna be fixing the unevenness in colors that I don't like, and then applying a final color correction or grade on top of the image. So that's essentially what we're gonna be doing right now. And I'm gonna kind of walk you guys through what happened before. So let's go back to the folders. So I'll show you guys the before and after, and then I'm gonna walk you guys through the steps. Okay, so okay, when I'm looking at this image, there's a couple of things that I see that we're gonna need to fix. So first and foremost, I shot this image on a blue backdrop because I wanted it to be something that I can basically use as a green screen. In this case, it's blue, but essentially it's gonna function as a green screen, so I can change the color in post to whatever color I felt best suited the mood. So let's first and foremost, let's work on that. So we're gonna go over here into our, I guess our selections brush. And what we're gonna do is make sure it's gonna be set to auto mask, which is down here. Default settings, feather and flow, 100%, density, 100%, all that stuff is fine. And we're gonna adjust the size of it with our bracket keys, left and right bracket keys. So we're gonna just paint. And then I also want to make sure it's showing the mask overlay as well. So basically with this, when you select that auto mask, you don't even really need to worry that much about hitting the subject. It's, I mean, dude, like Lightroom does such a great job when it comes to auto masking. The main thing is you just want to make sure that you fill in as far as the areas that you do want to be adjusted. So, because it's pretty easy to just miss gaps like I missed right there. So I'm using this with I'm doing all this stuff with the trackpad right now. I'm not going to be using the Wacom tablet because I'm not doing any retouching. I'm literally just going to do a couple of minor adjustments in Lightroom, and then we are done. I don't mind the fact that it hit the hair a little bit there. That's going to be totally fine. I'm not going to worry about that. All right, so now let's deselect show mask layer. We've gotten a decent enough mask. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to basically play around with the temperature, the tint, and then I'm also going to play around with the saturation to then get basically essentially that same color. This won't be exactly, unless I compare the settings between both images, it won't be exact. I'm gonna just do the best I can to essentially replicate. Ooh, I don't actually want that in here, so we're gonna undo that. I'm gonna do the best I can to replicate that. I'm actually gonna fill in some of these sections on the hair just because it's a little bit more obvious than it needs to be. So I'm just gonna kind of just paint in a little bit and just use that to accentuate the hair a little bit. And then use the Alt key to use the subtract function. And I'm also gonna change the flow. I'm gonna drop the flow down to 50% so it's not as hard, and then just kind of paint away some of those areas that are a little bit too hard. So something like that. Okay, that looks somewhat convincing enough. Cool. So that right there allows us to select the background, but then basically using the temperature, tint, saturation, that allows us to change the color, because you can just literally come in here and you can just change it to a number of different colors. Speaking of which, I actually missed an area over here, which is a great way to refine that a little bit. Okay, nice. And then hit that right there. Great. But yeah, you can just kind of play around with this. So I did like this kind of greenish color up here. I didn't have the tint quite that high because I wanted more of a green. It was like somewhere around here-ish. I don't think it was nearly that high. It's like here, more saturation. And then let's play around with the tint. Okay, and I still want it more green. And then somewhere around here. Okay. So the next thing that I play around with from there, I play around with the highlight and shadows as well. This is going to determine the overall exposure or background. You notice when I was changing the tint as well, that basically functions to change the saturation, even though there's a separate saturation slider down here. But highlights and shadows are really going to be able to allow us to really change the backdrop. In this case, I'm actually going to make it a little bit brighter than the original edit that I did. I'm gonna just make it a little bit more even like this, like something like that. Okay, so now that we have a color that we're kind of liking, what are some of the next issues that I'm seeing? Okay, so for me, I'm seeing that down here, this is just too bright. So let's fix that. So we're gonna do another custom adjustment, and we're gonna paint down here. Okay, and get like a decent selection, show mask overlay so we can see where we're working. Okay, we'll do that, something like this. And then now what we're gonna do, we're gonna deselect this, and we're actually gonna reduce the highlights. Okay, so that's looking better from an exposure standpoint, but now the saturation's too high. So now we're gonna just reduce the saturation so that the saturation up here is equal to the bottom down here, even though there's more light. So we're gonna change that. And then we can play around with the shadows as well to get like a smoother gradient. I'm gonna use the Alt key, same flow as before, 50%, and then I'm gonna just brush off over here to make the transition between those two adjustments a little bit more smooth. And then I'm also going to just fix the color by using the tint slider. The color is a little bit different as well, so we're gonna fix the color. All right, so now we have this kind of smoother blue. Okay, so the next thing I'm seeing two more things. One thing I'm seeing is that over here, this is a lot darker than it needs to be than over here. So we're gonna do another adjustment, show mask overlay, and we're gonna fix basically the shadows on this side. We're gonna bump up the shadows, and then we're gonna fix the exposure on that side as well. So we're gonna kind of just do that. And then bump up the shadows so the backdrop is more evenly exposed throughout. I'm also gonna apply it a little bit down here as well. And then I'm going to also increase the saturation just a little bit so the color's a little bit more even, and then just change the tint so we have that same kind of green. So now we have more of an even green. And then just use that same brush technique and do a gentle brush. Okay. And then that's a before and after. That's where we're getting so far. Great. And the last thing I'm seeing, there's two more things actually, there's two more things. The exposure on this side is a little bit too bright. It's a little bit distracting. So we're gonna drop the highlights down and then show mask overlay. And we're gonna paint over here. Gonna select this side as well. And we're gonna just select that. Okay, we'll deselect that and then fix the highlights so that the highlights on both sides of the backdrop are a little bit more even. Let's say somewhere around there. This section down here is still a little bit brighter, so I'm just gonna add one more and just paint in just this area right here. Use the Alt key, smooth it out a little bit, and then we're going to play around with the shadows just a little bit. Drop that a little bit more. Okay, before and after. Okay, get rid of some of these unnecessary tabs. We can work a little bit more seamlessly here. Okay, so the last thing that I'm noticing is that the exposure on her face is a little bit bright. So we're gonna do the same thing. And we're gonna actually, instead of shadows, we're gonna reduce the highlights just a little bit. All right. Okay. And then that is essentially it, all I've done. At this point, you can apply a little bit more contrast if you'd like. You can maybe apply 15 contrast just to have the image pop a little bit more when you're exporting this over to social media. At that point too, when you apply more contrast, it does increase the saturation. So if you want to maintain that, you can decrease both the vibrance and the saturation to -5 to -10. And then you get that a little bit extra bit of pop in terms of contrast without basically without it changing the colors. Okay, so I'm actually going to make a virtual copy. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the difference between that contrast versus no contrast. Okay. Okay, let me unstack that. And then you can see more clearly the difference between the contrast versus the non-contrast. Yeah, so this one over here is contrast. This one over here is non-contrast. It's gonna be very subtle because again, I did reduce the saturation vibrance, but essentially what it's gonna do is gonna add a little bit more pop. But yes, you can delete that virtual copy. But yes, so that right there is the final before and after. I didn't get it quite as close as the original image, but you know, God forbid, I'm just gonna remove that virtual copy. It's not gonna be identical to the original image. It's just a little bit brighter. But nonetheless, that was the basics of how I edited this image. I would actually just drop that down. No, I would actually pump that back up, but I would actually just reduce the highlights down here. Yes, that's the basics of how I edited this image. That was the workflow, the steps that I took in the exact orders that I took the steps. Granted, the results are a little bit different. I edited them a little bit different, just as far as color grading and exposure, things of that nature. But suffice it to say, that is how it was done. So, you know, I hope this video, I know it was long. This is going to be a multiple set. Like I said before, all the information that you guys need will be in the description down below. So definitely check out the timestamps if that's going to be beneficial to you guys. But ultimately, I hope this video added some value to you guys. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you got a little bit more insight on my specific workflow when it comes to editing images for just Instagram and just social media in general. It's just, I mean, that whole process really took me 15 minutes. Obviously, I'm explaining this to you guys, so it's very much dragged out, but it only takes 15 minutes. So I hope that workflow kind of helps you guys out and you get a little bit more insight. You know, if you're new here, definitely consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Hit us up with a like and a comment down below. Let me know if I kind of missed anything or if you have any specific questions about our workflow and, you know, something that maybe how I was using a tool and you didn't quite understand, let us know in the comments down below. And until the next videos, my friend, peace out.